find the quotient. We know that we cannot divide fractions. We need to keep it, switch it, flip it. We keep our first fraction. We switch from division to multiplication, and we flip our second fraction. Flipping is finding the reciprocal. Finding the reciprocal or flipping means to just write our fraction the opposite way. Now we can go ahead and we can multiply straight across. Before we multiply, we do have something in common between our 15 and our 9. Both our 15 and our 9 can be divided by 3. If we divide 15 by 3, we get 5. If we divide our 9 by 3, we get 3. Reducing our fractions ahead of time makes it much easier to reduce in the end or simplify. When we write out our multiplication problem now, we are going to have 3 times 3 over 5 times 4. Go ahead now and solve your problem and type your answer. What percent of 64 is 16? What percent? We know percent of means to multiply. 64. Our is means equal 16. So in this problem, we're solving for percent. We need to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which is division. We want to get our percent alone, so we're dividing by 64. Over here, we need to divide by 64. We're going to cross that out to get our percent alone, because that's what we're solving for. And here, we're going to get a decimal. Our percent can't be a decimal. We know that percents are whole numbers, so we're not going to get a 0 point something percent. So this is the decimal. After we get our decimal here, then we need to multiply it by 100. So we need to take this answer. Our percent is going to equal this answer times 100, and that will give us our percent. Now, we need to answer without the percent sign, so you're only going to give me this answer right here. Evaluate the expression. We are using PEMDAS. When looking at our expression, the very first step we have is our parentheses. I will give you a moment to solve your parentheses. When you solved your parentheses, you should have gotten 14. Then you need to rewrite the rest of your problem. The next step that you need to solve, we have multiplication, subtraction, and division. Well, multiplication and division are what's next. We go in order from left to right. So we know that multiplication comes first. So we are solving 14 times 7. I will give you a moment to solve 14 times 7. Those of you that got 98, you are correct. We now need to write the rest of our problem. We have two operations left, subtraction and division. According to PEMDAS, division comes before subtraction. So our next step we are going to underline is 45 divided by 9. I will give you a moment to solve 45 divided by 9. All you have to do is type these in your calculator. Those of you that got 5, you are correct. And you rewrite the rest of your problem. The last step that you need to solve, obviously, is 98 divided by 5. I will let you solve that on your own, and that will be your final answer. Solve for y. 13 equals 6 plus y. I'm going to rewrite the problem. Once again, this is where we have discussed about inverse operations, and we need to solve for y. So we are getting y alone. What is the inverse operation of addition? That is the opposite of addition. We are trying to get y alone. The opposite of addition, or the inverse, is subtraction. If we're trying to get y alone, we need to get rid of our 6. So we are subtracting 6. Whatever we do on this side of our equal sign, we need to do on the opposite side of our equal sign. We get rid of our 6's, we are now left with y. Go ahead and solve the rest of the equation, and you will get what y equals. Find the area. We know that area of a triangle equals our base times our height. Because a triangle is half of a rectangle, we divide by 2. Go ahead and fill in your base, your height, and then divide it by 2. You are answering without units. So do not write feet squared. Feet squared is the appropriate answer, but we are not labeling it feet squared. Find the surface area of the cube. This is a cube. With a cube, they all have the same length and width. So we have to find the area of this face. The area of that face is our length times our height. And they're the same because they're a cube. After you plug that in, there are 6 of them. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. Underneath is a 5, and in the back is a 6. So you are going to multiply that by 6 because there's 6 faces on a cube. So there are 6 of them. And that will give you your surface area of a cube. Once again, you are answering without units. Find the mean. Mean is the same as average. This is what you learned in your lesson today. In order to find your average, the first thing that you need to do is put the numbers in order from least to greatest. 42 is not in our data set, 47 nor 48. Only the numbers that have X's on them. So we have 43. We have to write 43 3 times because there's 3 43s. 44, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 of them. We have to write 44 5 times. 45, we need to write twice. And then 46, only once. The mean is the average. That means you need to add them all up. You need to add them all up. Add all the numbers up. And when you add, I'm going to give you a moment. Go ahead and add all of those numbers up. When you add all of those numbers up, you should get 485. Step 2 is you take your sum and you divide them by how many numbers in the data set. For example, we have sum is 485 divided by numbers in data set. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We have 11 numbers in our data set. Now, if you look up here in our directions, it says round to the nearest tenth. That tells me that when we divide, we're gonna get a decimal. So we're just rounding to the nearest tenth. So 485 divided by 11. I'll give you a moment to go ahead and do that. When you put that in your calculator, you get a very long decimal. Don't try to do this without a calculator, any of these. So you get 44.09090909. This is a repeating decimal. The 09 is repeating. So if we have 44.09 and this 09 is repeating, that's how we represent that. And we're rounding to the nearest tenth. This 9 tells my 0, the 0's in the tenth place, to go up to a 1. So our final answer is 44.1. I just totally answered this whole problem for you. Oops, you got a freebie. I think there's another mean problem on here, so that's okay. But I completely showed you how to round. So now you know. Find the mean. This is the exact same data set from the previous problem. But our first step, once again, is to put these numbers in order. We're not going to use 42, 47, or 48 because there isn't any X's on those numbers. But we need to write out 43 3 times because there are 3 X's on 43. 44 has to be written out 5 times. "45" has to be written out twice and 46 once. To find the mean is the same as middle. Our mean is our middle. Now this is how I personally find the middle. I don't cross off my numbers, but I underline them so I can still see them. I underline my first and my last. Those two are up. My second and second. Second to first, second to last. My third to last. My fourth to last. My fifth to last. And I'm left with one in the middle. That will be my median. I have a 1 left in the middle, and that's my median. So my median is going to equal 44. I gave you that answer as well. Mode. Find the mode. Mode is the same as most. Typically, I would have you order the data set. But in a line plot, you don't need to. You can just look 42's out, 47's out, 48's out. Look at this data set, and I think you can tell me which one has the most. And go ahead and answer this problem. Find the range. Our range, once again, is our biggest or greatest minus our smallest. If you remember our definition from yesterday, it is the difference, and difference is the keyword for subtraction, of the greatest number and the least number. That is the same as the biggest minus the smallest. So you need to identify the biggest number and the smallest number. Remember, these numbers don't count because they don't have any data on them. And then you subtract and find your range. Find the median. Median. Remember, median is middle. First thing that we need to do is order our numbers. I cross off as I order. We have a 12, 13. You have to put these in order to find the middle. You can't just find the middle of them randomly, because then you wouldn't be finding the true middle of the data set. You're finding the middle of a scattered data set, and that wouldn't even make sense. So putting them in order is very important. If you don't put them in order, you're really not finding the middle. Okay, now that our data set is in order and I cross them off so I know I use them all, then we start our process of underlining. And whichever one is left in the middle. I'm not going to do this one for you like I made the mistake of doing earlier. We are still going to be just left with one in the middle. Whatever one is left in the middle is going to be your median. Find the mean. Once again, you have to put this data set in order. Actually, for mean, you really don't have to put them in order, but I always prefer, because the next questions will lead to median, mode, that requires you to put them in order. We have 12, 13, 13, 14, 21, 22, 23. When finding our mean, we add up all the numbers. I'll go ahead and give you a moment to add up all of those numbers. If you got 118, you did perfect. Then your third step is you take your sum, which is right here when you add them up, and you divide by how many numbers there are, or how many pieces of data. So in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're taking our sum, which is 118, and we're dividing it by 7. In our directions, it tells us to round to the nearest hundredth. This digit right here is our hundredths place. We have tenths, hundredths. You will do this in your calculator, and you can go ahead and finish this on your own. You're typing in 118 divided by 7 and rounding to the nearest hundredth. That will give you the answer to the mean of this data set, which reflects the best measure of center. As you recall on yesterday, I told you we had mode and range. And mode was a measure of center, but range was a measure of variation. Today in our lesson, median and mean were both measures of center. So in this data set where we just found our median and we found our mean, which one reflects the best center of measure of center? If you recall from our lesson, we like median the best. But if we have an outlier, an outlier is a number that would be maybe way smaller than the rest. Let's say we had 1 in this data set. That would be an outlier. Most of these numbers are pretty close to one another. Or if we had 110 in this data set, that's an outlier. That is completely random from the rest of the numbers in this data set. That is typically when we would choose the median. We would want to choose something that is in the middle. But when all of our numbers are closer together and there's no outlier, we will choose mean as our best measure of center. You need to decide if this data set has an outlier, a number that is far off from the rest. If it does have an outlier, then you want to pick median. If it does not have an outlier, then you are going to pick mean.